What's up YouTube, and welcome to another draw along with me, where today we're going to create a fun little sign that's going to have a message potentially the same as mine, or you can use whatever message you want and in whatever fashion you like. Now you're not going to need anything but the built-in brushes. You'll need the palette though. There's a link to that in the description down below. And if you're new here, I post weekly tutorials using Procreate, so be sure to hit the subscribe button. But if you want access to even more tutorials with over a catalogue of 60 plus, there is a link to my Patreon in the description down below. So thank you so much for watching. Enjoy today's tutorial. And with all that said, let's get started. So once you've got today's canvas, the first thing we're going to do is change the background color. So if we go up to our layers and we go to background color and we check out today's palette, we're going to grab this one here in the top left of the palette. It's like a slightly off-white. And then we're going to go ahead and get started by adding in the main column in the center before we then add the words. So if we go ahead and go to our colors and we grab the top color in the second column, we're then going to go ahead and go to our brush library. We're going to go into inking and we're going to use the dry ink brush. Now the size is about 13%. It's a pressure sensitive brush, so the harder you press, the thicker the line, so just bear that in mind. What we then also want to do is go up to our actions. We're going to go ahead and turn on a drawing guide. So go to actions, the canvas tab, and turn on the drawing guide, and then edit that drawing guide. And we're going to want to use the symmetry option of vertical, so you get that line running down the middle. If you don't see it running down the middle, just go to your options and change it to the vertical option and hit done. Now if you go to your layers, just to triple check, the layer now says assisted on it. So we can now go ahead and draw in the main column in the middle. So this is going to allow us to do it on one side and it will do it on the opposite side for us at exactly the same time. So we're going to want to start roughly up here somewhere, just about this sort of point. We want a little bit of headroom at the top, and we can always move it later on anyway. So we're going to draw in a column like this, pop your finger on the screen to make sure it's a nice straight line. Something around about that for height will be pretty good. We don't want to go too low or too high. And then at the top, we're going to go ahead and zoom in, and we're just going to go ahead and link that. Pop your finger on the screen, you get a perfect angle at the very top there, and link those points together. I'm just going to block them in a tiny bit more. And then I'm going to go down to the bottom and just simply connect the two sides. Then what we're going to want to do is drag the color in. So we'll drag the color in. Now, if yours spills outwards all the way out, just simply drag the color in. And if it spills out like this, just drag it to the left and it will fill in the space and it will lower the threshold right at the very top there. So once you've done that, you've got your column. Now what we're going to go ahead and do is add in our text, just so we've got sort of a guide as to where to lay things out. So I'm going to go to my colors first of all and change my color to black or any other color, just so we can see it on the screen. We're then going to go to our actions. We're going to go to the add tab and we're going to add some text. Now we're going to go ahead and double tap on the text to start with and go to the weight here, for example, just to pull up the full menu. And I'm using the default font and I just want to change the size from 84.8 to 84.5. That's just the same as my test. And we want to make sure the text is center aligned. If we then go ahead and go back to the keyboard, we can then enter our message. Now I'm going to make sure everything is capitalized, so I'll double tap here on the keyboard and we're going to enter our message for today's design. So your happiness is closer than you think. So that's my message for my post. Feel free to change it if you want. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab my cursor and I'm going to move this down. So I'm going to pop mine just here. At the minute, I'm only really looking at the top area up there. So I hit the cursor there just to drop my message on, and that's kind of my gap. I can adjust everything afterwards. I'm most definitely going to make the sign a little bit taller in terms of the column in the background, but we'll do that later. So what we're then going to go ahead and do is we'll just lower the opacity down of that layer down to about sort of 10% for now. And then we're going to draw in some boxes. So I'm going to go tap on my column here. I'm going to go ahead and create a new layer above it. I'm going to go to my colors and I'm going to grab the top color in that second column again. And I'm going to go to my brush, making sure it's still the dry ink, which it is. And then we're just going to simply draw in some boxes around it. Now, if you want to, you can go ahead and tap on the layer for a moment, tap on it and go to the drawing assist. So we're going to utilize the drawing assist, making sure what we do on one side is reflected on the other. And that will just keep things nice and symmetrical. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a box around the text. Now with this brush, you do want to make sure you don't get sort of the side profile of it. Otherwise you'll make it really quite large. And we're just going to create some boxes around our text. That's all we need to do So draw a line all the way across, pop your finger on the screen, and then drag the color into that space and just fill in any gaps where you feel is necessary, and move the box again also where necessary. Now for a moment, we're going to create the actual sort of signs individually, and then we'll merge them all onto one layer. So I'm then going to go ahead and create another new layer. Now for this one, I'm not going to use the drawing assist because I want to create a separate type of sign here with an arrow on the end. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a line under the word happiness all the way across, put my finger on the screen, and I'll just manually draw in a box around it. So I need to make that a little bit taller, and I'm just popping my finger on the screen every time just to try and make sure I get a nice straight line. Pop my finger on the screen to about here, and then we're going to go ahead and just create a point. So I'm going to pop my finger on the screen and it'll give me a perfect sort of 45-degree angle, and then everything will be nice and consistent that way. And there we go, we've created a little sign. Again, we can drag the color in, and we've got another one. Now what I do recommend is we go to our cursor and we just move the signs every time to the center. Your wording for a moment will be slightly off, but we'll adjust the wording later on just to fit everything. I want to make sure the signs at least are nice and symmetrical in the center. We're then going to go ahead and go to our layers, create another new layer. And I'm going to kind of do the opposite of that. I'm going to have an arrow pointing off to the right this time. So I'm going to draw in another line across here. They don't have to be straight either. Maybe create some fun variety in your lines where they don't have to necessarily be sort of perfect and parallel. And likewise at the ends as well, they don't have to be a perfect shape. They can be like a little bit skew. You can make them a little bit sort of more bumpy and lumpy. Like I may go back up to that layer shortly and just adjust the end of this one so it's not quite so straight. And that way we just create some variety in the sort of wood shapes. So I'll go back to the one I was working on and I'll create that arrow on the end. And again, you don't have to do the 45-degree angle if you don't want to. You can make up the angle if you wish. I'm going to go for something like that and drag the color into that space. And again, we've got another sign that again, we want to go to our cursor and drag it towards the center, a little something like this, and pop it on that center line. Tap on your cursor when you're done. We're then going to go ahead and create the next one. So create another new layer and just repeat. Now this one, I'm just going to go ahead and do a box, just a straightforward box on this occasion. But I want to make sure my brush is nice and strong. So I'm going to draw that across again. And I'll draw it in down here. And again, I'm just going to try and add the odd little random sort of not quite so straight line to just create some variety in the wood shapes. And then drag that into that space. And again, potentially I might want to adjust that later on, but for the moment the sign looks good in terms of its sort of structure. And then I'm going to go ahead and create one more new layer. And we'll do a box for this one as well. Now for this one, I'm going to go a little bit wider than it because I'm also going to introduce a little smiley face on it. So I'm going to go ahead and just draw in a straight line to start with and draw in another line across. And then when we get towards the lettering stage, I'll just simply move the word across and leave space for a little smiley face in there. So I may need to come back to that later on, but you should have something like this. Now, as I mentioned, I'm actually going to go ahead and go to my layers for a moment. I'm going to go ahead and go to the column in the center, duplicate it, swiping it to the left and duplicate it. Grab my cursor and just move it down a little bit. I just want to have a little bit more height at the bottom of the main column, a little something like this. So you may need to also do the same, and then just simply tap on the layer and merge it down. So tap on it and merge down, and that will all be on one layer. So at this point, you may need to go ahead and move some of your signs potentially. You may want to make some slightly bigger. For example, I can make the happiness sign. If I go to that arrow, let's make that one a little bit bigger. We don't want to have the gaps all sort of perfect, so we can make that one a little bit bigger. That is quite a key one for this message. So a little something like that. And maybe I could go ahead and make another one slightly smaller if I want to. And we can do that a little bit closer towards the end. But otherwise, you can also go ahead and make adjustments to the shapes. But I'm happy with how that looks for a moment. We're going to go ahead and move on to the tracing stage. So we're going to go to our layers. All of your signs, as long as you're happy with them, we can then go ahead and pinch all 5 into one layer. We're then going to create a new layer above that. We'll go to our colors. We'll go ahead and grab this color here in the top left of the palette. We're going to go ahead and continue with the dry ink, and all we're going to do is simply trace over the top of the wording. And we kind of want that somewhat hand drawn look to it. We want it to be a little sort of less perfect, and just don't stress over it too much. I want it to have that nice looser look to it, as if somebody has just simply painted this on to the sign, just in a nice easy manner, just to create a nice message. So I'm just going to go ahead and just trace over all of the words and make my way all the way down. Now, as always with my tutorials, I don't tend to skip anything, so you'll just see the whole process as I make my way down. And you can see mine definitely varies quite a bit to the font itself. I'm not trying to spend too much time making sure each letter, is in proportion to the one beside it. I like that edgy look to it. So we'll continue to make our way down here, making my way through each individual letter. And again, it's just a guide. It's just a guide. Please don't stress over it too much. Your handwriting skills will not be evaluated. If anything, mine would fail. So just bear that in mind. My handwriting is actually awful. So we're just making our way through the last few sort of letters. Only one more sign to do. Now, this one here we're going to adjust shortly in a second, because again, I want to introduce that little smiley face. Now that H is slightly wild, so I'm just going to bring that back in a little bit. So you can see there, a little mistake, but I always like to keep them in, especially with the fact that I don't skip over anything. So that's all you need to do. And as I mentioned, once you're done, I'm going to grab my selection tool, make sure color fill is turned off so it's nice and grey. And now I'm going to select Think, grab my cursor and just move it across to the left. Just a little bit, tap on my cursor when I'm done, and then just get in here and create a little smiley face. So just 2 dots obviously, and a little smile as well. This is a nice little end to the sign. So then what you can do is you can go to your text, you can either turn it off if you want to keep it, otherwise you can swipe it to the left and delete it. We don't need it for anything else in today's design. We're then going to go ahead and add in a little depth effect to the text while we're still here. So we're going to go ahead and tap on the text that we've drawn. We're going to use the option of select to select that shape. Again, make sure color fill is turned off, it's nice and grey. We're going to invert the selection. So at the minute we've just got the text selected, but if we tap invert, we've now selected everything but the text. Which means if we go to our layers, we'll create a new layer, and tap on that layer and clip it to the text. We'll go to our colors, we'll grab the darker red, the second color in the second column, and we'll go to our layer, tap on it and fill it. Now the layer is filled in with everything but the text. And if we go ahead and zoom out of our canvas just a little bit, because it's going to fill up the whole screen. If we go to our cursor, and we go ahead and we use the uniform option here, if we bring this node in a little bit on the right, just a little bit, just a couple of pixels, move it into the center of the design, but then move it slightly down, you're going to be able to create a little bit of a 3D effect in the wood as if this was engraved. So I'm going to move it onto that center line and just move it a little bit down. That's all we want to do, just a little bit. That way, the text now has this sort of indentation on it, where you can see the inside of the text where it's been carved into and then just simply painted inside. And you don't need to stress over that either. The only thing I'm going to do is just move it up a pixel or two. And you can tap at the top of the screen just to do that, and then tap on your cursor when you're done. So now we've got this cool 3D effect on the actual text. We can now add a little bit of extra depth to the actual wood and the signs. So we're going to go ahead and go to our layers. I'm going to create a new layer above all of our signs, and then tap on it and clipping mask it to the signs themselves. Now all we need to do is just simply zoom in. I like to rotate my canvas just a little bit, and at the bottom here just simply draw in a line that runs across the bottom of every sign, and you're kind of creating the underside of the wood. So you're creating that little bit of a 3D look to it. If you drew in some arrows like I did, you're just going to want to do the underside of this part of the arrow here. So just chuck that color in. We'll go ahead and do another line across here. Want to make sure it's nice and strong, so you do definitely get that effect of the 3D look. And we'll add in that little bit of depth there too. And another one across the top sign. So now you should have that sort of 3D-ish look to the bottom of your text. Now what I do recommend at this point is we're going to go to our layer. We're going to go ahead and select both of those layers, so the shadow we just created and the signs. I'm going to grab my cursor and I'm just going to move them down a little bit. So I'm going to tap 1, 2, 3, 4. Simply being, I want to make sure that the text now sits in the middle of just the original red color. Otherwise it's going to be a little bit too low and too close to your shadow edge there. The next step is to then go to our layers. We're going to go to our column. Now we can actually just simply tap on the column and alpha lock it. And with that alpha locked, we can't paint outside of it. And all we're going to do is zoom in and just sort of shadow left to right, creating lots of streaks to build up a shadow underneath our signs. So just left to right, and then I'm occasionally leaving a little bit of a gap where we're just creating a little bit of a downward shadow underneath here. A little something like this. It's using the drawing assist, so it's going to be sort of quite straight and horizontal, and it will match up on either side. Now, for example, this gap here is a little bit bigger, so I can just let that sort of run only to a sort of midpoint there. That's fine. I'll do the same here too. Just create a little bit of an undershadow, a couple of streaks down, and you'll have created even more depth in your sign. So let's get started with adding on the actual texture for this. So we're going to go ahead and add in the image that I've added in the description down below. So you're going to want to go ahead and in your layers, we're going to go above the wooden sign here, and we've got the shadows. So all the signs and you've got the shadows. We're going to create a new layer. We'll tap on this layer and we'll clipping mask it. We'll then go to our actions and we'll go to the option of insert a photo. Now, once you find today's photo with the texture and you've saved it to your gallery, tap on it and it will add it into our canvas. Now, what we can go ahead and do is just scale this down a couple of times because I want to make sure the grain in the wood is quite small. I don't want it to be nice and big. So I'm going to scale it down to sort of this sort of size to start with. Then go to the layer, tap on it and change its blend mode. And we're going to change it to the option of soft light. And look at the difference between those pieces of wood now and the ones above. You've got all this cool texture in it. And again, just so we can add some texture to there, we'll swipe it to the left and duplicate it. We'll grab our cursor and just move it up and just scale it so it fits over the other ones at the top. And tap on your cursor when you're done. So just a simple way to add in some texture. We're then going to go ahead and go to our texture here, swipe it to the left again and duplicate it. But this time drag it down and in front of our column. Tap on it and clip it to the column. And then we're going to want to go ahead and adjust this so it fits in a vertical fashion. So we're going to tap on our cursor. We're going to go ahead and use this green node here at the top and rotate it round to about that 180. And then just scale this up and move it so it just fills up the entire column. Now you can go ahead and move it left to right. And then you can see if there's any textures in the actual column that you like the look of. Like I like this, I've got a little bit of grain here. So you can see I'm using this bottom right area. So I'll tap on my cursor when I'm done and we've got some cool texture in the sign. Now before we carry on, I also want to go ahead and go to our layers. This layer here that's got our shadows on for these signs, I'm going to go ahead and make sure I go back to my brush and it's still the dry ink. And then for each sign, we can either bang in a single nail or we can put in 2 nails. I'm going to put like a little dot here and a little dot here, another one here, and you don't have to do 2 every single time. Don't force it in if you can't fit it in, but we're just going to add in some nail spots here. This is going to make it look like it really has been chucked onto the column, and I'll add another one here too and another one here as well. So exactly the same brush we were using before, but just a nice little extra detail. Right, let's do the background and we're nearly done. So if we go to our layers, we can go ahead and create a new layer right towards the bottom. So create a new layer and just drag it all the way to the very bottom. We're then going to go to our colors. We're going to grab this color here in the bottom left of the palette. We're going to go to our brush library and we're going to go to painting and we're going to use the Nico roll brush. The size is going to be set to about 16% to start with. And we're just going to very lightly create a ground. Now what we want to do is we want to sort of have a strong area towards the bottom with then some nice lighter fainter lines in the distance. So I'm just going to run this left to right with some quite light pressure and then overlap myself a few times and then just have a couple of faint lines in the distance where the scene just sort of disappears into the back area. And then I'm going to block these ones in a little bit more as it's a little bit closer. So that way you get a sort of real understanding that the ground does just sort of disappear and run off into the distance. I'm also going to go ahead and just reduce the brush size down a tiny bit, maybe down to about 7 or 8%, and just dark up the bottom area of the column here very lightly, and just letting that sort of blend out towards the edges just a little bit, as if there's sort of a downward shadow. And then I'm going to increase my brush size back up to 16%, and I just want to block this in one more time on the left side and the right side in the ground layer here where our column is sitting. So a little something like that, some fun texture. Now before we carry on, I'm also going to go ahead and create another new layer. I'm going to go to my colors, and we've got this light blue at the bottom of the second column, and we're going to go ahead and add in a gradient of blue from the top that fades out towards the bottom. So you may want to increase your brush size maybe to say 26%. Start off quite sort of strong towards the top, and just as you get further down, just sort of blend out your texture and let that run out. So that way we have a little bit of blue that runs into the original yellow in the background, just to sort of show that there is a bit of sky there. And it's a very faint change, but it's a nice little extra touch. Then we're going to go ahead and go to our layers. We're going to go right to the top of our layers and create another new layer. We're going to go ahead and go to our brush again and switch it back to inking and the dry ink. We're going to go to our colors and grab the bottom color in the first column. I'm going to zoom in, and we're going to just create some blades of grass that just flick out, that are just going to sort of somewhat cover up the bottom area of our column. Now don't fret, we're going to add a few different colors here. So we're just going to create some blades of grass outwards, a little something like this. Not fill in every single gap, but just enough. And then we'll go ahead and go to our colors. We'll switch it to the, let's go for the top color in that first column. And we'll introduce some lighter blades in here. So just a few in here in the same sort of fashion that you did a second ago. Just sort of illustrating that there is like a good clump of color here. And a good set of blades of grass, just covering up the base of the column. A couple that run astray is fine. And then switch back to your colors and go to the bottom color in the first column and create some more blades that just sit on top of that. And these ones are just going to basically cover up the very bottom of the column, making sure we kind of lose that solid line. I'm creating lots of tiny little baby blades basically at the bottom here, just to cover up that bottom area of the column. And make sure you zoom out, don't get lost in those details, as I always say. Just take a look and see what you've done. See if you like it, maybe add in a couple of more stray ones that are quite large. And feel free to switch back to even the middle color in the first column, which we haven't used yet. So just another tone in here, just to add in a couple more blades. They're just running a little bit astray, and just pull off that little effect. And with that, we're actually done. The only thing I want to do is go to my background with the sky blue, and I just want to go up to my adjustments, hue, saturation and brightness, and maybe just mess around with some of these settings. Maybe just drop the brightness down to about sort of 46%, so we can bring in a bit more of that blue tone in the background. You can even adjust the saturation if you want to. I'm going to keep it at 50. I'm just going to drop the brightness down to about 46%, just so that we can get a little bit more color in that sky and it's not quite so sort of faint. So I'm then going to go ahead and tap on my adjustments. I'll go to my actions, my canvas, and I'll turn off my drawing guide, and I'll pinch with 2 fingers. I'll go full screen with 4, and we end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed today's tutorial. As always, please be sure to share your designs with me over on Instagram, and a massive shout out to all of my supporters on Patreon who help make these videos possible. If you want to support the channel and get access to a catalogue of over 60 tutorials, sneak peeks, early access and much more, hit the link in the description down below and come and show your support. And if you didn't already know, I've recently released the Trust the Process merch. You can go ahead and grab that from the store in the description down below as well. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.